I was doing some work for Vice, and there's a place in Utah called Skinwalker Ranch. I'm not sure if you've heard of this place. Okay, yeah. So anyway, it is allegedly one of the most sort of paranormal hotspots on the planet. It has a show on History Channel, of course, because everything has a show on History Channel nowadays. The ranch was purchased by an unknown individual. And then a trailer to this documentary comes out where Brandon Fugel, from sort of chest down, so you can't see any of his head or anything, is being interviewed by the filmmaker. His voice is all like kind of crispy and dark, like they blur it out, so you can't recognize the guy. But the shirt he's wearing and the watch on his wrist is a very particular type of watch. And so I was like, oh man, that watch ain't cheap. So I went from a career in teaching and writing about people who believe in aliens to doing OSINT full time. That's the journey. And I think there's this kind of misunderstanding when it comes to OSINT. I don't think OSINT is a career per se. Like, I don't think you can say, I do OSINT as a career.
Everyone, David Bommel back with a very special guest. MJ, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
MJ, you got a fantastic story. I believe you did stuff with Vice. You were doing, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but a reporter of sorts, is that right? And then now you're an OSINT. So that sounds like a really interesting journey. Can you tell us about, sort of what happened? Sorry, go on.
Of course. Yeah, no problem. So my journey into the OSINT world is one of those kind of typical, I think, OSINT stories where you kind of just fall into it. There was no method or anything here. It was all madness.
I love it.
Honestly, I graduated from university with a background in English and critical theory and culture studies and all that stuff. And I immediately knew at the age of like 20 years old, I was like, I'm going to be a school teacher for the rest of my life. And that's what I did. I became a school teacher for 12 years. I was a school vice principal assistant principal for a couple of years as well. So that was the first part of my life. And I taught school, and as I was teaching school, I was kind of realizing this is not what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. I was sort of kind of getting into this grind, and I was not enjoying it. And a friend of mine kind of brought me back into my academic kind of career. And part of my academic background was I was studying subcultures in university. Yep. So whether it was like punk subculture or goth subculture, whatever, I got into a friend kind of put me on this path of like, hey, have you ever thought about researching people who are like in like UFO cults, or they like believe in aliens? Have you ever like thought about this as like a legitimate path? Because I guess there hadn't been a lot of research done into this area. And I was like, you know what? Sure. I'll do it. So I started literally speaking to people who say they were abducted by aliens. Yep. No judgment if you think you've been abducted by aliens. Stranger things have happened in religion. But it led to a book ultimately that I wrote about sort of the UFO subculture, or essentially about the subculture of people who believe in sort of these kind of esoteric things. After I wrote that book, Vice and I kind of got to talking, the news publication, and they were really interested in this type of content. And at the time, we need to remember this was sort of, mid 2017, 2018, we had a Trump presidency. We had all of this kind of, COVID had not happened yet, but it was, nobody knew it was on the horizon. But, we sort of were in this pre-moment of conspiracies and QAnon and all of this stuff was kind of starting to percolate in culture. And the UFO belief system was really intermixed in that quite close. So Vice had a significant interest in this topic. So they tapped me and I started writing articles for Vice, a lot about UFO cults, a lot about people who believe in UFOs. I think I wrote about one gentleman who was convincing people that Trump was like a reptile alien. Oh, wow. I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff. And, I worked on a few documentaries for Vice regarding a couple UFO cults. Some had tragic endings. Some were kind of a little more silly and strange. But that put me into the OSINT space. All of a sudden, what starts happening is when you start working on these deep investigative reporting pieces, trying to track down money on how cult leaders earn money, spend their money. You start kind of going through their financials that you can find online, donation websites like GoFundMe, whatever. You kind of start doing all of this OSINT work. Fairly early on, I got connected with a guy named Justin Seitz, and we had never met, but he's been on your show. At this time, we hadn't met, but I started using his tool, Hunchly, because it was really imperative that we started logging all of this data that we were collecting. And I kind of got to know OSINT folks through kind of using Hunchly and asking questions. And I started to kind of build up a bit of a Rolodex of people I could speak to, other journalists who are in this kind of world, like investigative journalism, that type of thing. Eventually, it led me to start up my own news publication with a couple friends of mine called The Debrief. And we cover mainly science and tech, where we're that's the nerdy side of me that loves like Star Trek and all that.
Nice.
But we
you
also
get extra points for saying that. Yeah. Sorry, go on.
Yes. Yeah. Listen, I've even got like a little. I got a little.
Well done. Well done.
Anyway, yeah. Anyway, long story short, we started this publication, and I started kind of soft shoeing out the teaching door, and I started working for basically OSINT firms in Canada. So I started working with a crisis intelligence monitoring firm based out of Edmonton, and then I worked for a company based out of Ottawa that was doing intelligence work with the Canadian government. And that eventually led me to meet Justin Seitz in person, because we were actually working at the same firm, which was kind of a weird merger. And we basically became friends, and we have since kind of soft shoed into our own company. So myself, Justin, our wonderful CEO, Kennedy Chappell, as well as a few other people I can't name because they're kind of more silent partners. But we essentially started our own investigation intelligence consulting firm called Permanent Record Research. And currently I'm the head of investigation and analysis there. And we are basically doing OSINT work, intelligence work, investigation work, fraud detection, all that good stuff, threat assessments, whatever the client needs. And that's what I do full time. So I went from a career in teaching and writing about people who believe in aliens to doing OSINT full time. That's the journey in a very long nutshell.
I love the story. I mean, it's interesting how OSINT, I'm assuming OSINT was like so important when you're searching these people, right?
Oh yeah. And I mean, you start, looking into people's backgrounds and you start connecting, tissue, like, so for, one example, we were doing research into a particular, new religious movement. We can't say the word cult anymore, I guess, for legal reasons. I don't know. We're looking at this cult, and there was, these sort of gentlemen who were engaged in this cult and kind of leading it and essentially earning a lot of money during COVID, especially because people were staying home, they were watching YouTube, and everyone thought it was the end of the world anyway. So this kind of new agey self-help merged with aliens and UFOs thing was really big, generating millions of dollars a year for these guys. But once you start looking into their backgrounds of who they actually are, like you start doing kind of the OSINT work, you realize that, this con had been going on for decades. You realize that the con had evolved over time. You find data that's like, where they went to school, what they did for careers prior to, they can't necessarily back up the claims they make saying that they're, educated in whatever Tibetan monastery, blah, blah, blah. Like you can't find any record of that in real life. Rather, they were, pipe fitters, working construction, and then they just started conning people. You know what I mean? Like it is what it is. But OSINT gets you there. And a lot of times you start meeting people in the OSINT space who can maybe help you take those next steps in your investigation that you couldn't take yourself because you just don't have the background. I don't know how to write Python code, for example. Like that is not in my background. But I met enough people that I was like, listen, hey, can we build a tool that can scrape this? And they'd be like, yeah, sure. And we would work together, and I'd give them credit in an article, and all of a sudden, we're scraping data off of a website, going back a decade that we can just pull out and essentially kind of comb through. So that was sort of the perk. And when I started Permanent Record Research with Justin, we already had, and I mean Justin definitely, but I already had a pretty established Rolodex of folks that we could kind of sort of call on. That if we need support, it's like, yeah, we have a person for that. We have a person for this. And that's really what has built Permanent Record. And that's really what has built, I guess, my trajectory and my career path is not necessarily the skills you pick up as you go, the tools you pick up as you go. It's like meeting people and networking and getting to know them and building those networks that all of a sudden, let's help each other. Let's work together on projects. And that's essentially what happened.
I love that because I think what I find amazing about the OSINT community is how open and welcoming they are, and they share a lot of information, right?
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, I have met very few people, and I'll be honest, it's kind of the older, stodgier investigators who are like grizzled PIs who have been in the trenches for really long, they're very unwilling to help or talk to anybody. I think they just kind of do their own thing and they're happy in their own little world.
Yep.
But generally, the vast majority of OSINT folks, right, who are maybe, a little younger, they've come at this world from all of these different places and they've kind of found themselves here. Everyone's very willing to discuss and share ideas, share tools. It's like there are sometimes there's tools out there that are incredibly expensive that a person like me cannot afford. Like we're talking about corporate level, government level tools here that costs tens of thousands of dollars a month to use. You know enough people to be like, listen, yeah, okay, you want me to run a phone number through this? Yeah, no problem, I'll do it. And they just do it quick and they send you the report and you're like, this never happened. Do you know what I mean? Like, great. But you still got the data, right? Like you still have the information because you just built that friendship. And when that person comes to you and is like, hey, I kind of need help with this, or can you advise me here? Or, I've never done a podcast before. Can you give me some tips? It's like, yeah, sure. No problem. I can do that. Let's sit down and get it done. So that's how it is, man. Like it's just all relationships and building up and meeting people and sharing, essentially.
So your background was teaching English literature, right? Critical theory, UFOs. Go on.
No, I never taught UFOs, thank God.
I was going to say, what were you teaching the kids in?
Yeah. No, it was mainly English culture studies, and I taught ancient history as well, which was actually a lot of fun. Like the ancient world. So that was the day job. I mean, it's unbelievable. Like it feels surreal to be here now, especially sitting on like honestly, I'm on like the David Bombal show. I mean, this is like a surreal moment for me. But to think that I was a teacher once, like I remember it, that it was like a different life. You know what I mean?
How many years have you been doing OSINT? Like I'm full-time OSINT, if you can call it that.
Yeah, sure. Full-time, like actually getting paid to do OSINT work. We're going on 3 years as like I have been employed doing OSINT. Prior to that, the investigative journalism bit, developing shows, documentaries, podcasts that have that kind of investigatory, kind of journalistic concept, that add another 5 or 6. So, grand total, just under a decade or so of kind of part-time OSINT and then 3 years of full-time OSINT.
I mean, the reason I wanted to ask that is I've interviewed people who've been doing OSINT for like 20 years or whatever. I mean, a decade is a long time.
Yeah.
But what would you advise people who are starting out? I mean, do I need to learn Python? Do I need to learn technical skills? What are like the most important things that you would advise yourself? If talk to your younger self or someone who's starting out, what would you advise yourself to do today if you were starting today?
Yeah, it's tough, right?
Yeah.
Because I had the luxury of a slow burn in, and I know a lot of people who want to do this line of work, they don't have that. My advice would be to outside of just networking and meeting people, my advice would be you need to definitely have some technical skill now. Fortunately, I know enough people, but if you don't know those people, having the ability to write your own scripts sometimes via Python really helps. Knowing how to use Linux really well and knowing how to use all those tools that exist for Linux that are essentially free, that the paid version of for like your Mac or PC is $100 a month. Or sometimes way more, right? So if you can utilize that kind of more dark arts material of let's say Python and Linux and understanding those ecosystems, you're definitely gonna be sort of on that upward trajectory, because you can do a lot of stuff that just like good old fashioned gumshoeing can still accomplish, but it just takes longer, right? So that's kind of my first sort of piece of knowledge. And literally I am teaching myself this stuff like right now in my old age. I am like going back and trying to figure out how to use like Linux properly and how to actually, pull all these GitHub repositories off and start using these tools in Linux, because, I feel like I should know this in between obviously working for clients, which are, paying money to our company to do work. You have to kind of balance the education versus the professional side of the work. But I think, I think it's tough. There's no one trajectory. And I think that's kind of the weird thing. And I think there's this kind of misunderstanding when it comes to OSINT. I don't think OSINT is a career per se. Like, I don't think you can say, I do OSINT as a career. I think you do investigations, or you do intelligence analysis, or you do policy analysis, or you do journalism, or you do whatever. And OSINT becomes kind of part of that work, right? So when we talk about, becoming an expert in OSINT or becoming a professional OSINTer. I think we just need to have a general understanding that it doesn't mean like you can go out, like you're not going to be like, I am an OSINTer on my job title.
Yeah.
You'll be like an investigator, analyst or whatever. So, but my advice would be a bit of background in those spaces would be really helpful. But after that, you need a big whiteboard, big crazy whiteboard where you can write all your notes and have red yarn everywhere. And really the mindset of if you don't like puzzles, if you don't like solving stuff, you don't like that kind of gumshoeing, going out there and finding stuff and information and data and just the need to complete the puzzle, that's something that you got to train into yourself. Because there'll be moments where you'll be banging your head against the desk for 2 weeks trying to find a little shred of a clue somewhere, and you just don't, and you're at the verge of giving up. I've worked on stuff for 6 months, and it's just like there's no way we're gonna find this. It's gone, guys. And then all of a sudden something pops up, and you're just like, oh my god. So the gumshoe kind of drive, touch of Linux, touch of Python, mile wide and an inch deep of knowledge in kind of all things. And there you go. That's the path to OSINT, I guess. But don't take my word for it. Just one person here.
Yeah, but it's, I love getting perspectives. And I mean, your story is very cool. I would never have thought UFOs and, full-time OSINT investigations would go hand in hand. But I mean, that's such a cool story. But I think what I wanted to touch on there is you were doing it part-time. So like a lot of these careers, you don't have to resign today and then try and do this full-time, right? You can do it on the side and see if you actually enjoy it. And that can kind of grow as you meet people and then job opportunities come.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I when I was a journalist with Vice, I wasn't a full-time staffer there. Right. I was what they refer to sort of jokingly as a perma-lancer. So you're a freelancer who gets gigs. So you no longer have to pitch. They just send you work.
Yeah.
So there's benefits to that because I could still sort of do teaching full-time. I could work on this in the evenings or on weekends when I had some spare time. I was tapped to do an investigatory podcast with Sony Entertainment. It was the same thing, right? I was still teaching. I was working on that part-time. And then, again, I think as the contract kind of freelance work started to kind of all come together, you start to realize, maybe I could make a go of this. Yeah. Maybe I could step away from teaching for 6 months and just give it a shot. And, I applied for a few jobs that were in the OSINT space and I got one, and all of a sudden there was my exit, right? A full-time job doing OSINT plus all this freelance stuff that I was working on with Vice and with Sony and a few other studios, History Channel. All of a sudden it was like, I'm good. I can go now. Like I can actually do this full-time and commit to it. And that's what happened. I appreciate not everyone has that luxury, right? I totally get that. But at least for me, what made all the difference was having the ability to connect with people in this space, as well as obviously, shout out to my family who were super supportive of this transition, going from a stable teaching job into this sort of unknown world. I'm sure, my partner had plenty of sleepless nights trying to figure out, will this work or not? So, thanks, honey.
But don't give us figures, but I'm assuming, hopefully, you earn a lot better today than you were when you were a teacher. Well,
now here's the thing. I'm not sure if your audience can tell by my Tim Hortons cup, but I live in Canada, and in Canada, teachers actually make pretty decent coin. We pay our teachers well in this country, so I do make much more. But the point is, it's not like I was making no money to a whole bunch of money. I'm happy and comfortable. Let's put it that way. And yes, the teaching gig was great. You can earn 6 figures as a teacher in this country. I'm definitely obviously in a definitely a better position only because I'm my own boss now and it's nice. And Just Insights does whatever I want, which really helps.
MJ, a question that always comes up, right? A lot of people watching think tools are the way. Are there any specific tools that you would recommend or that you can suggest, or what's your take on tools?
Yeah, no, listen, in OSINT, tools are essential. But, I think for me, my pitch to everybody here is fundamentally one of the best tools you can have is essentially friends who have access to those tools.
I like that. Good friends.
So, I have, good friends who have access to great tools that they can share or that they can use, in exchange for something else. You know what I mean? Like you sit around, you have coffee and you like, hey, can you do this for me? Or can I do that for you? And, it all works out.
Question always comes up, right? So there's communities in OSINT. I'm assuming people I've interviewed in the past have given me some communities. But what are your favorites, MJ? Like what's benefit benefited you perhaps the most in your journey, or what would you recommend people go to? Is it like Discords? Is it follow people on X? Give us some guidance. Where should I go?
Yeah. So for me, it's again been pretty circuitous, but the places like X, Twitter, LinkedIn, Blue Sky, all these places have fairly robust OSINT communities, depending on what you want to do, right? If you're looking for, just some basic skill building, you're looking just to get to know people, kind of engage, obviously Twitter has kind of always been the OSINT hub.
Yeah.
If you're kind of looking for more of the professional side, like you want to potentially engage people who professionally work in investigations or intelligence work, and they use OSINT a lot, LinkedIn is obviously kind of the place to be. For some reason, in the last 2 years, LinkedIn has become my favorite social media, and I don't know why. I think it's a sign that I'm getting old.
I didn't say that.
And I can't keep up with the young folks on their new social medias. So there's LinkedIn, Twitter, there's kind of the usual spaces you go just to network with people. When it comes to kind of, Discord servers, OSINT for All is a really great Discord chat that exists, I guess, a room, and they've got a whole bunch of sort of different rooms, and it's like an entire kind of ecosystem of OSINT that ranges from, capture the flag tournaments to cybersecurity stuff to, straight up open source intelligence. How do you find people on Facebook kind of thing? So OSINT for All is a really great place to go. Obviously, Recon Village through DEF CON, they have a nice small little community. The Discord server has about 400 people on it, so it's not jam packed with thousands. But the Recon Village folks are great because these are people who kind of exist in that kind of strange world between sort of the DEF CON cyber threat intelligence hacking world and the OSINT space. So you get kind of that dual purpose.
That's nice,
with them, right? You get that kind of straight up classic OSINT, but you also get the sort of cyber threat actor component that you can sort of utilize as well, which is really being merged in the OSINT world. So Recon Village is terrific. Big shout out to them. Apart from that, if you want to start getting into stuff, Trace Labs is always looking for volunteers to help with investigations. I think Bellingcat is always, looking for folks who can potentially, throw data their way. There's I think the National National Center for Child Protection, I think they have a sort of a volunteer area that you can sign up for. And essentially you can aid in investigations for human trafficking and child protection. And, unfortunately none of that's paid, but it gets you into those worlds and it gets you to meet people who operate in those worlds. And again, you get to share sort of tips and tricks and you kind of learn in that organic way, not, going through a book or going through a training course. Not to say those things are bad. Those are terrific things. And if you have the time and the resources to do them, awesome. But for some people, they just don't, right? They work a day job and this is just sort of a part-time thing. Doing it and volunteering and kind of getting your feet wet, swimming in the pool, you pick up those skills kind of through osmosis.
So let's talk about books, and then I want to talk about jobs. Are there any books that you'd recommend?
Totally. Ray Baker's book is terrific. I'd also obviously recommend, I got the old one, but, every OSINTer probably has one of these on their shelf at some point. And it's funny, you can tell 7th edition is when I kind of started getting into this world a little more seriously. So that's
I've got a newer one, I think. 9th. Yeah, obviously. Yeah. You've been doing this for longer.
I'm not David Bombal. I don't get to, get free swag from people. There's a shot there. So yeah, everyone's got that, obviously Justin Seitz, I can't, promote his stuff enough. He's a coworker, obviously, and a partner. So obviously I'm going to shamelessly promote his work, but, he's in the process of writing another book as well.
Right.
So, but if you're into, Python coding and that type of stuff and how it merges with OSINT, he's got books based upon that. So, there's so much out there, man. The internet
that's
is
the problem,
full
right?
of stuff.
Overwhelming.
Yeah, it is overwhelming. And don't get overwhelmed. You have to start slow, right? No one became an expert OSINT expert in like a year, right? It takes decades to grow and develop and figure out what works and what doesn't.
This is one I want to ask you about. What got you the job? When you said you applied for a job, being a school teacher going into OSINT, that's quite a jump. But you obviously did a bunch before that. But what do you think opened the doors?
Yeah, so when I started working for a company in Edmonton, and I was at this point a freelance journalist for a while. I had an investigatory sort of journalistic podcast under my belt. I had 2 documentaries. I had some stuff on History Channel that I did work on. I had a bunch of articles. So I sort of had the investigatory journalism kind of
proof of work,
bubble.
right?
Yeah, I had receipts.
Yeah.
And the job itself was actually to kind of keep going down that road. They wanted to create content, podcast, and video content that took the OSINT work they were doing and then essentially would break it into almost like a story that you could watch. It was called The Breakdown. And so we created a bunch of episodes, and it was literally taking, a few points on a heat map of, people are reporting, a wildfire, or people are reporting a shooting, or people are reporting an explosion. So we would then take that and we would kind of zoom in on it and then like OSINT it out to see what actually happened that day and how everything was moving, who was calling who. We were listening to 911 calls and just kind of going through all of this and turning it into a narrative that shows how you can utilize live kind of crisis monitoring to develop really robust threat like assessment reports, OSINT reports, intelligence reports, whatever. And we just made it shiny and cool through a video and a podcast. But it was essentially taking the journalism work, and instead of having at the end to create an article or a podcast, we were creating sort of these cool little videos and little audio episodes that would sort of tie this all together for a viewer. So that's what landed me that job. I had already had the receipts. Yeah. I started doing that. And then, you start doing a lot of OSINT and people watch those videos and then they get interested in those videos. And suddenly people start calling you being like, hey, I saw this, did you ever think of this? And all of a sudden you start talking to them and they're giving you advice, or you're trading advice, or you're giving them advice. And then you're building your network, which then led me to my job with the company out of Ottawa and Just Insights and sort of doing intelligence work for the Canadian government as well as other clients. So yeah, it's just, again, the beauty of networking.
Yeah, I always hear the same thing, right? Put your work out there.
Yeah.
Network with people.
Exactly. Yeah.
And, don't, we discussed it here as well, part-time. Don't jump unless you're ready. You don't have to burn the ships and then go straight into this. You can start slow.
Yeah, agreed.
MJ, you got to tell us a story. Surely you must have come across some mad, like outlandish or really interesting story either recently or perhaps in the past. Can you share something?
Yeah, totally. I've got a lot of stories.
Sure.
And doing the line of work, I have literally for a podcast traveled across the United States, like looking for weird stuff. And because, I never expected to find it, to be honest. Like I'm very much a skeptic. I do not believe that there's aliens coming to Earth. I don't believe in any of that stuff. I'm very much kind of a hardline skeptic, but I respect people's viewpoints and their beliefs. So I think that's why generally people are really willing to talk to me, because I'm going to hear you out and I'm not going to be insulting.
Yeah.
I believe you believe. But I think kind of the more OSINT-y story. So we'll get into kind of the really OSINT stuff. I was doing some work for Vice, and there's a place in Utah called Skinwalker Ranch. I'm not sure if you've heard of this place. Okay, yeah. So anyway, it is allegedly one of the most sort of paranormal hotspots on the planet. It has a show on History Channel, of course, because everything has a show on History Channel nowadays. And no offense, History Channel, I do work for them on occasion. But they have a show on History Channel. But prior to all that, prior to the show, there was word out there that essentially the ranch was purchased by an unknown individual. So someone in Utah bought this ranch from another gentleman who we knew, but was remaining completely anonymous. Basically, I'm not going to tell you, and that's it. It was bought by a shell corporation that was owned by another corporation, and essentially kind of the trail went cold, and it was, registered to a lawyer's office. And long story short, I decided, I wonder if I can figure out who the owner is. And Vice was very much interested in being like, listen, if you can figure out who the owner is, that would be a great story. Yeah. So the OSINT happened when an individual who sort of knew the owner and was making a documentary with them and all this, and the owner was still maintaining anonymity. This sort of filmmaker documentarian took a selfie at one point and posted it on Instagram of a private jet, and part of the selfie just past his head, so kind of in this area, you could see a couple tail numbers. You couldn't see the whole thing because his head was covering most of it, but you could see a few tail numbers on the back of this jet. And in the post, he wrote, with the owner of Skinwalker Ranch going to Utah right now, or something like that. So you can insinuate, okay, we have a tail of an aircraft. We have an individual who knows the owner. of this haunted ranch, and he's saying he's going on a plane with him to go do it. So maybe I can figure this out. So I start essentially going through tail numbers of aircraft based upon like the shape of the tail, based upon like the way the windows are set up. Essentially, I'm able to track down the type of private jet this is. So then you start looking through registrations of this jet in Utah, and it led me to one place. And that tail number, at least the last, I think, 2 digits I had, corresponded with one of the jets that was owned by this company. And I was like, maybe. So I started doing research into the owner of this sort of firm that owned this private jet. And it led me to the last name Fugel, which in Utah is very well known. The Fugels are sort of a wealthy family, and Brandon Fugel was the brother of the owner of this airplane, or the owner of the company that owned this airplane. And Brandon Fugel, he's a commercial real estate guy in Utah. And when I mean he's big, he's hundreds of millions of dollars in wealth, if not like nearing $1 billion in wealth. Like Fugel is quite wealthy. So I was able to put together that Brandon Fugel was probably the owner of Skinwalker Ranch, but I couldn't prove it. And then a trailer to this documentary comes out where Brandon Fugel, from sort of chest down, so you can't see any of his head or anything, is being interviewed by the filmmaker. His voice is all like kind of crispy and dark, like they blur it out, so you can't recognize the guy. But the shirt he's wearing and the watch on his wrist is a very particular type of watch. And so I was like, oh man, that watch ain't cheap. So I zoomed in, I started kind of doing some examination of this watch, and I was able to determine it's a very sort of particular brand, quite expensive. And so I was like, I wonder, because this all tracks, right? He's a rich dude, commercial real estate, like this all makes sense. So then I start watching videos on YouTube of Brandon Fugel giving lectures at like real estate conferences. And there's one point where the cameraman is like there, and he's on, like, Brandon Fugel's on the stage, and the cameraman zooms in really close on the guy, and Fugel like picks up a water glass or a water bottle, whatever it was, I can't remember, and he takes a sip, and it's zoomed in right on this sip and this watch, and it's the exact same watch, like no word of a lie, it was the watch, and I knew it. So I did what any good journalist does, is I sent an email to Brandon Fugel, and I was like, hey, I'm a journalist with Vice. I'm very confident that you own Skinwalker Ranch. I'm writing an article about the ranch. Do you want to comment? Well, he immediately turns around and says, like, well, hold on a second, buddy. Like, first of all, you caught me. Second of all, let's have a discussion. And in exchange for not just outing him outright, I was able to go to the ranch, get an exclusive, visit the place, talk to his folks, talk to his staff, get all that. And then I was able to release his identity in a follow-up article a few months later. So essentially I got 2 articles for the price of 1, which is always worth it when you're a journalist. But that's how I OSINTed out that Brandon Fugel owned Skinwalker Ranch via a tail number and a watch.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
I love stories like that.
Yeah, it was, I can't believe I did it. It was one of those moments of like, and it's a dumb luck moment of, if I hadn't watched that YouTube video, I would have still probably not figured, you know what I mean? Like the YouTube video was the clincher for me. Yeah.
So this is, for everyone watching, a good reason to watch YouTube videos, right? Get paid to watch YouTube
100%.
videos.
Yeah, you can OSINT it out. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. So it led to a lot of. I mean, listen, Brandon Fugel. He was nothing but a gem. Really nice guy. You know, we went to Skinwalker Ranch a couple times actually for various projects. I did a podcast there as well. So, he's a really nice guy. Do I think Skinwalker Ranch is haunted by some sort of paranormal deity? No, I don't. I think it's just a ranch. But it's still cool. It's still a fun place to go. I've had a few weird moments there that I can tell in another episode of this podcast if you ever invite me back.
That'd be great.
But I won't get into it now because we're going to run out of time.
Something I've learned in life, and I think you've mentioned it many times, right? You can work by yourself in isolation, but you're not going to go as far as with a team or a community. Has that been your experience? It sounds like it in getting into OSINT.
Yeah, listen, one thing I'll say is, when you have other people who you can work with, when you have other people who you can run ideas by or throw ideas by, having those extra sets of eyes will really help in not just putting stuff into perspective, but also viewing the world in a different way that maybe you don't view the world. And suddenly it opens up new corridors possible exploration or investigation. So oftentimes, like when I worked, for example, with the company in Ottawa, a lot of the folks that I work with came out of the military or the law enforcement sector, and they view the world in a very specific way. And then I was, and a couple of us were, from journalism or from cybersecurity or other kind of lines of work or previous experience, and we view the world in a very different way than like a police officer does. So when you put us all in a room together, even though, we're all kind of chasing the same target or we're chasing the same information, we're going to kind of think about that target or that information in really different ways. And I think that the benefit of having a team, just like we do at Permanent Record, which is a whole variety of people from different lines of work. We have lawyers, we've got hackers, we have like content people, we've got marketing, we've got ex-school teachers. We all like bring different ideas to the table. And if you can find that kind of team, right? If you can find that small circle of friends in the OSINT space that you can bounce ideas off of, that you can say, I'm stuck here, what do you think? They're going to be able to provide you sort of these different outlooks that you're going to say like, oh my God, how did I not see this? Like you're going to hit your head, they're going to be like, oh, really? Oh, I'm so stupid. Like, you're going to have that moment of, oh, this is child's play all of a sudden, right? And not only that, that little group of people will have natural kind of tendrils that connect to other people in the OSINT community who you can also rely on for help. I can't tell you how many times I have been in situations where it's like, I don't know the answer, MJ, sorry, but this guy might, or this woman might, you should reach out to her. And they will then say, hey, this is my buddy MJ. He's doing this casework. Can you help him with this? And all of a sudden it leads to a brand new connection of an individual you didn't even know existed, but they can aid you so much in your research or your work, and they become like a valuable ally. And this has happened. This has happened like hundreds of times throughout my career. So you can't tools, skills, talents, like the ability to learn this stuff, that just comes, right? You will learn, you will develop skills, you will develop all those things. It's that team of people that can make or break you. It's that team of people who will push you forward and who will allow you to see sort of the world around you in a different way and give you different perspectives, that all of a sudden the investigation doesn't seem so daunting anymore. They're able to provide you various lenses, and the more lenses you have, the more roads you can walk down, I guess. And fundamentally you'll complete your task or your job or whatever it is more efficiently. It'll be better, it'll be higher quality, and you won't miss so many things in sort of the loopholes of your investigation. So that's my pitch here. Team is what makes all the difference.
MJ, anything you want to share before we wrap up? I think you can tell us perhaps a bit about where you work, like your handles on social media. Can you share a bit about like what you're doing these days? And then we can wrap it up.
Yeah, there's definitely a few places you can find me. If you're into the more geeky, sciencey tech side of stuff and you just want to take a break from OSINT, you can find my work and my writing right now at thedebrief.org.
Nice.
It's a science and tech publication for all of the dreamers and the weirdos out there who love to talk about space travel or how they're going to grow food on Mars, or, how the Pentagon is trying to build a laser weapon. I mean, it's all that cool stuff that you read about in the news that you don't believe because it feels like science fiction, but it isn't. So thedebrief.org, big shout out there. We do a lot of fun work, occasionally OSINT articles, but this is more for the nerds out there. For the more OSINT stuff, if you want to really dive in with us, you can find our work at Permanent Record, which is permanentrecordresearch.com. You can also find our blog at bullshithunting.com. And we have some cool writing happening there, a few little free OSINT lessons, some great reports that we're covering on some wrongful convictions, and some interesting storytelling there. Obviously, Permanent Record, we are a brand new firm, but we got a lot of heart. And we're really punching through way above our weight with some of our clients. So if you're looking for some work, let us know. Permanent Record is always kind of looking for folks as well as contractors, as well as potentially clients if you're interested and you need some work done. But yeah, that's kind of where you can find me. I'm on Twitter, at MJ Banias. I'm on LinkedIn, probably MJ Banias as well. You can just Google me. You can watch me on TV. I don't know, whatever you want.
It's amazing how, just like you said, you meet one person, then you meet another person, and every person that you meet along the way, you just learn from. And so many amazing people out there. Thanks so much for sharing.
No, thank you so much. It has been an honor to be here. I truly appreciate it.